with the Penguins off yet again on Wednesday, it's time to do a little bit of a farm update and update everyone on the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Pat and I are going to do that, plus dig into reports about the Penguins potentially doing a fire sale at the trade deadline right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at SendThemForWet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this episode. We are free and available on all platforms. So, Pat, Penguins off yet again on Wednesday. Another much-needed day off considering they played 3 games in 4 nights. They look like they were potentially going to be gassed for that game against the Kings, and then they go out there and they blow the Kings out of the water. So Penguins were off on Tuesday. They'll practice today, but still, they're not playing today. The next game is Thursday, 10 o'clock start time for you late-night warriors like myself against the Anaheim Ducks. But before we preview that game on Thursday, it's time to do a little bit of an update on the farm in Wilkes-Barre. So Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, they've been off, Pat, for a little bit, but they're getting back into action this week. Sergei Murashov has been recalled. Philip Larson, the Penguins goaltender, who's having a outstanding year in Wilkes-Barre, he's a bit banged up right now. He's going to be out for the next, I think, 2 to 3 weeks. So Murashov is going to be up here with Wilkes-Barre along with Tristan Jarry. We're going to start with that because I'm curious to see how Wilkes-Barre divvies up the starts here. Do they do a 1A, 1B? Is Jarry the starter with Murashov the backup full-time? Or do they really give Murashov the lion's share of the starts? I would maybe lean towards doing a 1A, 1B here. Yes, you do need Jarry to keep playing, even though he's not going to be up with the main squad of the Pittsburgh Penguins for a while. But this is a pretty big call-up. Murashov has lit up the ECHL this year, man. He's been outstanding. He's winning basically every start. He has an elite save percentage, well over 920 this year. He has been fantastic. I really want to see what he can do now in the AHL, where obviously he's going to face some better competition, but this is going to be a lot of fun.
This is the logical next step for Murashov. You brought up all his ECHL numbers with the Nailers, and it's very clear he's too good for that level. But with the sudden depth that the Penguins have in the organization when it comes to goaltender, I know everything that's going on in Pittsburgh. I get it, whatever. But when it comes to the goaltenders that they have in Wilkes-Barre and the goaltenders that they have in Wheeling, there is a log jam right now. So it's very difficult for these guys to get up to the next level. And as for Murashov, he has spent a little bit of time with the baby Penguins, played 2 games this year. He had a 250 GAA as well as a 919 save percentage in 2 games. So it's a very small sample size, but at the very least, he showed into 2 games there that he can handle that workload. Now, the challenge becomes, can he handle that with a little bit of a more expanded role, a little bit of a longer look? And while it's not going to give us any sort of definitive answer on whether or not he's ready, it'll at least give us an idea as we come to a close in the 24-25 season, if next year he is deserving to get an even longer look at the AHL level. But all of that is dependent upon what happens with the goalies at the NHL level. Does Tristan Jarry continue his time with this organization, or are they able to move on from him this offseason? Can Yoel Blomqvist take the next step and be a consistent NHL goaltender? What does Alex Nedeljkovic's future hold, even though he's only got next year left on his deal? But a lot of this is positive. You want to see what he can do at the AHL level with an extended look. Is he developing faster than we'd like, or is he going to need, say, another season or 2 in the American League before he makes the jump to the National Hockey League level?
Yeah, I would agree. And just going back to one of your points, I do think a little bit of it depends on finding a taker for one of Jarry or Nedeljkovic. I do think still Ned is the easier of the 2 to move, but I think if you could pick one to move, it would be Jarry. Just, with his contract, you free up the cap space. He just has seemed like a broken goaltender all year this year. He probably needs a change of scenery. Well, I shouldn't even say probably. He does need a change of scenery. So I do think part of it depends on that. And once a move like that happens where one of these two goalies at the NHL level gets moved, or one of the main guys gets moved, that really opens up more avenues for some of these younger goalies to get playing time. Say they do move on from Jarry and they trade him to a team that needs a goaltender or something like that. You can ride Ned and Blomqvist at the NHL level until the end of the season and figure out something. And then you can really have maybe something like Murashov and Larson in Wilkes-Barre. And then, you can still have Taylor Gauthier in Wheeling. I know he had a great year last year, having another good year this year, but it does open up at least another spot. And seeing Larson and Murashov go at it in Wilkes-Barre with Larson fully healthy, that would also be a lot of fun too. So I'm just really excited to see what he can do with more of an extended look this time. You said it, 2 games, 919 save percentage, really low sample size, but now he's going to get a little bit of an extended run here. Larson's going to be out for the next 2 to 3 weeks. I want to see if he can get a decent amount of starts here to really show what he can do at the AHL level against some better competition.
And that's another thing to keep in mind when it comes to the organizational depth of the Penguins. And yes, he is hurt, so he's going to be out for a little bit, but you also have to factor in Larson because we've talked about it. He's been extremely good for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins with a 929 save percentage, 4 shutouts, and a 237 GAA. This is a guy who they took a chance on, and it appears at the very least at the minor league level to have been a good bet. So there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, when it comes to goaltending in this organization, but we will see how these next few weeks shake out.
Agreed. And the other main player that I really want to discuss during this first segment, Rutger McGroarty, it was actually a week ago today that he had one of his finest plays as a member of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Pat was able to lift the stick of one of the opposing players, beat the defenseman at the blue line, get sprung on a 2-on-1. His skating is top-notch on that and fires a beautiful cross-ice pass to Avery Hayes, who makes no mistake. Rutger McGroarty is playing some really good hockey in Wilkes-Barre right now. I know he had a little bit of a slow start. Some of the pucks weren't going in when he was starting to play a bit better, but now the pucks are starting to go in a bit more, and you're seeing that playmaking ability as well. I mean, you look at these stats this year for McGroarty in Wilkes-Barre, 5 goals, 18 points in 31 games, right behind Vasily Ponomarev, who has 19 points, and Tristan Brose. And Brose, speaking of him, he's going to be coming back soon. He's been out with mono for a little bit, so thank God that he's okay, by the way, because that can be pretty serious. He's also been really good this year. I expect him to potentially get a call-up maybe after the deadline, same with McGroarty, but McGroarty is heating up, my friend.
Yeah, 6 points in his last 6 games. He's had 2 goals, 4 assists, and he really has come on strong over the last month and a half. He's really started to round into form and look a lot like the player the Penguins were hoping to get. I will say this, Josh Yohe, our friend, had some reporting this morning basically saying it wouldn't surprise him if McGroarty spent the entire season in Wilkes-Barre, and I think that's probably the best move for him. I know that everybody was excited to see him at the start of the year, but you could really tell when he first started the season due to some injuries in the NHL that it wasn't that he isn't ready yet. It's that he's just not ready to be utilized in the way that they want to utilize him. He's not a bottom 6 player. He's not going to benefit from playing 7, 8, maybe 9 minutes a night. He's a guy that you want to play in Wilkes-Barre in your top 6. You want him on your top power play. You want to be able to trust him in big moments. And the biggest thing that he's got to work on, and it's been the report on him ever since he got to the National League level, as well as on the radar of a lot of scouts, is he's got to work on his skating. His skating is not quite to an NHL level yet, but it's very close. You give him more and more time to work and to build in the American Hockey League. It feels like, and this is also based off of Josh's reporting, that when they call him up, that's the only time they want to call him up. They don't want to have him bussing back and forth from Pittsburgh to Wilkes-Barre, changing rosters, changing level of competition. They want him to be able to be a dominant force in the American Hockey League to the point where they say, all right, he's got nothing left to do here. It's time for him to develop into an NHL player at the NHL level.
Right. And I know some people are going to freak out after what you just said, Pat. Oh, how could he spend the whole year in Wilkes-Barre? We gave up Braden Yeager to get him. Sometimes this is what has to happen for a player's development. He's playing against good players in Wilkes-Barre. He's developing more assets of his game. Once he has all that down, they're going to call him up for good, and he'll be in the NHL and hopefully be a really solid middle six contributor that can also potentially play on the top line if needed at times. I still maintain that I think he might get called up after the trade deadline for the final month of the season, Pat, to maybe get him some games, see what he can do. And I think that could also help his development a bit more. But if he were to stay in Wilkes-Barre the full season, I guess I wouldn't be surprised considering how they're handling him. But again, I still think there's a good chance they're going to call him up after the deadline. I just don't want people freaking out about it.
Yeah, and to bring this
trades,
kind of
these type of trades take time, man. Like they really, really do.
And to bring this full circle with what we're about to talk about in the second segment about these reported fire sales in Pittsburgh, if you look at a lot of the contributors that have made the Washington Capitals one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, not counting the guys they acquired in the offseason, guess where they spent a lot of time?
Yep.
Hershey. They spent a lot of time in the AHL developing into legitimate NHL contributors. And yeah, it's annoying because we have been in such a win now mode and in such a we want the immediate results in Pittsburgh, as we should because of how good this team has been for the last 20 years. But to where this organization is now, you're going to need some of these guys like McGroarty, like Bros, like a couple others who are going to spend half a season and even full seasons in the American Hockey League. But once they come up, they stay up.
Yeah, man. And that's the biggest thing, because I know some people like to rush all these prospects, but sometimes this takes time. Someone like Ponomarev, we got a glimpse of him earlier this season, looked the part, but it was still obvious he needed a little bit more seasoning. But the time is definitely coming when he's going to come up full time. Same with someone like Ville Koivunen. We haven't seen him at the NHL level full time yet, but he's still playing really well this year in Wilkes-Barre. 10 goals, 27 points in 33 games. These players, their development is going really well, but you never want to rush it. I just see so many weird takes about, McGroarty and all that, and why isn't he up here? We traded Braden Yeager for him. It's like, again, sometimes this stuff takes time. And when he's fully ready and some of these other guys are fully ready, they're going to come up and hopefully they are going to make a difference. But that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, Pat and I are going to address these little fire sale rumors and reports that we've seen make the internet rounds these last couple of days and give our takes on what's actually going to happen at the trade deadline. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they have helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million. No medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. One more time, that's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. So, Pat, there's a couple of these little fire sale reports we've seen this week. This first one, well, the main one, I should say, came from RG.org. If I'm saying his name correct, his name is Marco Di Amico. I hope I pronounced his last name right. I apologize if I did not, Marco. But he basically is reporting that a fire sale is imminent in Pittsburgh, and there's very few names that are safe. He basically, I'm reading this verbatim, Sid, Evgeny Malkin, Brian Rust, and the two kids, Tomasino and Pickering, they are off limits for now, but everything else can be had for the right price. And then he asked a source, when asked to clarify that longtime Penguins defenseman Chris Letang was not on the list. The source replied, I don't know right now. I'll put the link to this in the description box for everyone that wants to read it. I will say this. I want people to be very careful about what they read on the internet. This is not being reported by really anyone else. I listened to 32 Thoughts last week from Elliot Friedman. He even said the big guys are not on the block. Yes, Dubas has forwards, defensemen, and goalies available, but he even said none of the big guys are available. Pierre LeBrun had his rumblings blog on Tuesday. He even said, yeah, there's no fire sale that's imminent. I read this morning from Josh Yohe. He said the same thing. There is no fire sale imminent. The players that I think are available are as follows, or that I think will get traded are as follows. Matt Grzelcyk, Anthony Beauvillier, Marcus Pettersson, Drew O'Connor, maybe one of the goalies, maybe Noah Chari, maybe Matt Nieto. I'm sure a whole bunch of other players are available for the right price, but you're not going to be doing a fire sale at the trade deadline. If you're going to make potentially bigger moves, that's probably going to happen over the summer. And I don't think that they're even going to trade Chris Letang. I'm not going to have my bias influence this conversation. I just look at this objectively. I look at the contract. I don't think a lot of teams are going to want that. And also, I think he wants to retire as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, same with Evgeny Malkin, who's not getting traded. Same with Sidney Crosby. Erik Karlsson, I think that's a situation you potentially deal with in the summer. You maybe go to him and say, hey, do you want to go anywhere? Do you want to go chase a cup? Do you want to go back to Ottawa? Stuff like that. That's not going to happen at this deadline, though. So I think, again, people need to be careful what they read on the internet. I don't expect a fire sale. That's not going to happen. There will be players that get traded. They're going to sell people, don't get me wrong. But to say that, oh, all these big guys are on the block, pretty skeptical about that.
The thing that baffled me about this is it's just describing the Penguins' plan that has been the plan the whole season, just using a different word to make it look a little more flowery. There is going to be what is a mini fire sale for the Pittsburgh Penguins at the deadline, because a lot of the names you brought up, Anthony Beauvillier, Drew O'Connor, Matt Nieto, Matt Grzelcyk, Marcus Pettersson, you know what they all have in common? They're pending UFAs.
Yep.
They are going to be free agents at the end of the year, and they all have differing values for teams that might be actually contending, especially Marcus Pettersson, especially Drew O'Connor, and the way he's been playing this season, Anthony Beauvillier. These are players who provide value to contending teams that are on expiring deals, and those are what get you solid returns at the trade deadline when you're not a contender. Kyle Dubas has been saying this for pretty much the entire season, dating all the way back to this past offseason. The Penguins are in the business right now of stockpiling draft picks and stockpiling young talent and hoping that they can develop them into NHL players to see the big three off into the sunset and then carry this team into the next generation. Does that mean that in this process, they're going to find the next Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin? It's extremely unlikely, because they're never going to be bad enough to get a first overall pick or pick in the top three. But if they decide to get aggressive this offseason and say there's a team like Ottawa or a team in that realm that is kind of sniffing around the playoffs like the Penguins are, or maybe a team that had a disappointing season like, say, a Nashville, who might not pick extremely low this year because they might miss the playoffs by a wide margin, and they can trade up and get a higher pick in the first round, maybe they can do something like that. But at the end of the day, they're just describing what the Penguins have said they're going to do at this deadline and for the next year or two. It's not really that groundbreaking. And yeah, people say, oh, they didn't put Chris Letang on the list. And I'm of the same school of thought as Josh Yohe, where I could see a world where maybe they move him if somebody's a taker and he wants to go, but I still think it's extremely unlikely. It's just a general manager doing his due diligence of, if I get a call on someone and it's an interesting enough offer, I'm not doing my job if I don't listen. So at the end of the day, they just took what the Penguins' plan is and just gave it a little bit different language.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Again, if there's going to be bigger moves, I think that happens during the summer, like, the big blockbuster. I think the biggest trade you'll see at the deadline is Marcus Pettersson. And, I don't think we're looking at a Jake Gensel type return here for Marcus Pettersson. Gensel, 40-goal scorer a couple of times. Pettersson, really good second pair D, can play on the top pairing. but I don't think he's going to be bringing back that type of haul. I think at best what you're looking at in that return, if you can somehow get a sucker to give you a late first in something else, like a prospect, roster player, one of those two, because I think you're probably going to get two things back. If you can somehow get a sucker to give you a late first, that'd be awesome, by the way. But it's probably going to be, I don't know, second round pick with a prospect, or hopefully a young roster player that can come back and play in the NHL for the rest of the season, and they can see what they have in that guy. I think that's probably what you're looking at in a Pettersson trade. Again, I hope that he just keeps bumping up that trade value to hopefully get a desperate GM to maybe give the Penguins a late first, which, hey, they could maybe dangle that for immediate help during the summer to get a young player that could really help for now with Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and well into the future once all three of those guys retire. So again, they're going to make like the big moves. Like, for example, even like a Raquel trade, I think that would be a bit of a bigger move. That might happen in the summer. Same with Erik Karlsson. I don't think he's going to be dealt at the deadline. And I'm sure the Penguins really don't want to retain any money on that, considering how much money it is. I think that would happen potentially in the summer if he gets moved at all. Again, Crosby's not getting moved. Malkin's not getting moved. Brian Russ is not going to get moved. And yeah, I would be absolutely stunned if Chris.
I will say this. I wouldn't be shocked if they make one of these bigger moves, whether it's with, say, Raquel or Erik Karlsson. I wouldn't be shocked if they retained a little bit of money, because next year, all of their big retained money comes off the books in the retention of Jeff Petrie, the retention of Riley Smith.
Right.
And then all you have left is $900,000 on the Jack Johnson buyout. So they'll have retention slots, and with a cap that's about to go pretty far up, they probably can afford to retain a little bit, because they're not going to go big game hunting in free agency or on the trade market. They're not going to go out and get a $5, $6, $7, $8+ million player on the market. So if you're able to say, hold on to $1 million for Rickard Rakell or $1 million for Erik Karlsson, it's not going to torpedo their plans. But again, that's something that they'll address in the summer, because those are moves you make over the summer. We saw it when they acquired Erik Karlsson. You needed damn near an advanced calculus degree to figure out all of the moving parts in that deal. And I know people say, oh, that's the job of the general manager to be able to figure that stuff out. Listen, when your only focus is roster and cap management in the offseason, and not making sure you're cap compliant during the season, and making sure your rosters are hitting all the right spots, and you're looking at evaluations from the minor leagues, it's a lot easier to make those big deals in the summer than it is during the season.
Right. 100%. I agree with that. And I think that will do it for the second segment when we're discussing this fire sale. Coming up to end the show, it's Wednesday. You all know what that means. It's time for Pat and I to give out our Warrior helmet for this week's MVP. And considering what happened last weekend, pretty sure all of you know who we're going to give the helmet to for this week. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our second sponsor, and that is FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is so easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid right away. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this NFL playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, I will start with this one because I know you have the same pick. The Warrior helmet for this week for me goes to Penguins goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic. Scores his first NHL goal, also gets an assist in that game against the Sabres, becoming the first goalie in NHL history to record a goal and an assist in the same game. He has now also scored in the NHL, ECHL, and the AHL. And he's had two back-to-back great starts of well above 900, was a big reason why the Penguins won that game in Buffalo, and was a big reason why the Penguins just won in Los Angeles, made some really nice timely saves. Outside of the Oilers game, I think these are his two best starts of the season. Great stuff from him. Easy pick for me.
Yeah, real easy Warrior helmet this week to pick for the week that Alex Nedeljkovic had. Like you said, 952 save percentage against the Sabres, 962 against the LA Kings. Two very solid starts from him. For the Kings game, wasn't tested a ton, but made the big saves when he needed to make them. As for Buffalo, the Penguins got severely outshot against the Sabres. And while it was a lot more quantity over quality from the Sabres, still, you make 42 saves in a game. That's a pretty solid performance after you face 44 shots. Same thing in LA. A little bit different where, yeah, there were some quality chances, but he made the saves he needed to make, including after the Kings get on the board on the 5-on-3 power play. They were starting to build a little bit of momentum. They were starting to come on. He makes a big save. The Penguins immediately go down the ice and turn it into offense. And those are the kind of saves that, for the most part, the Penguins have been missing from their goaltenders this season. Then, of course, you add on first goaltender in the history of the league to have a goal and an assist in the same game, on top of, like I said, making 42 saves. That's a pretty good night of work. So huge week from Alex Nedeljkovic this week. Easy Warrior helmet pick. And I got to add this on, Hunter. We're starting to agree a little too much because, as you know, I am keeping track of our Warrior helmets this season. This is the 6th straight week that we have given the Warrior helmet to the same person. So last few weeks, let's go through it. Week 9, Rickard Rakell. Week 10, Sidney Crosby. Then 2 weeks in a row, we give it to Michael Bunting. Last week, it goes to Brian Rust. And obviously this week, Alex Nedeljkovic. But that said, that's kind of the way this Penguins season has gone. There haven't been exactly a laundry list of players for us to choose from. Everybody just seems to have one good week, and then we got to figure out who has the good week the next week.
It feels like either Crosby, Rakell, Rust, or Bunting are in the lead right now, because I know we've given quite a few Warrior helmets to those guys. I mean, it makes sense. They've been some of the Penguins' best players this year, but I know Sid's right up there. I know Rust is up there, and I especially know Rakell is up there, especially because of the year that he's having. I actually would not be surprised if Rakell is leading the pack.
Rakell is pretty high up there. He's got 2. So does Michael Bunting. Crosby's got 2. Yep. Brian Rust has 3. So yeah, you're pretty much right on point there, that it's been the Penguins' biggest contributors being the Penguins' biggest contributors this season.
I'm hoping we can give one to Gino soon, because I think he's starting to heat up a little bit more. Hasn't gotten a lot of love with the Warrior helmet lately, but I do think the time is coming when we're going to give the Warrior helmet to him, because I do think he's starting to get his legs back. I really do believe that. But Pat, do you have anything else to add for this episode before we close out today?
All good for me. Let's get ready for the rest of this late night hockey couple of weeks, because I know you are absolutely in your element.
10 o'clock start time on Thursday for the Penguins game against the Ducks. Again, people, late night hockey is awesome. If you need to drink a coffee, drink some other beverage, do it. Have a snack, do that too. Stay up, watch some late night hockey. It is a lot of fun, but at least this weekend they play Seattle. That's an afternoon start time. I know the Sharks game is going to be a bit later, as well as the Utah game. Trust me, people, late night hockey, it's not much better than that. But again, I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another episode for you all on Thursday to preview this big game against the Ducks and discuss any other Penguins related news as well. So for Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday.